Welcome to another installment of Seasonal Rot Showcase, where I'm fucking mad! My god, what the hell happened here? How did things get so bad? The revival was doing so well too! Total drama, how could you do this to me? Okay. Let's just start from the beginning. Total Drama is a show that I don't think needs much introduction. A Canadian animated series spoofing popular reality shows in which teens compete for a chance to win $1 million, Total Drama Island was an instant hit upon its premiere, with numerous viewers being drawn in by the unique premise and format, as well as the colorful cast of characters. Total Drama currently stands as one of Teletoon's biggest shows, with its original run consisting of more than 100 episodes across 6 seasons, 7 if you count its spin-off The Redonkulous Race. After laying dormant for several years, and getting a baby spin-off that I'm fully convinced was just a collective fever dream that we all shared, in 2021, it was announced that Total Drama would be getting a revival, simply titled Total Drama Island, and would premiere in April 2023. Or at least, that's when it premiered in Italy. Canada wouldn't get this revival until 6 months later, and as of this recording, we are still waiting on a US release date. Moving away from this show's disastrous release for a second, if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on the first season of the Total Drama revival, as well as my history with the franchise, you can check out the video I made last year, detailing my thoughts on it. Long story short though, pretty much everyone was dreading this revival. Not only did the few glimpses we get of the show not make it look all that promising, and the aforementioned awful way its release was handled made it seem like Fresh TV and Teletoon didn't have a ton of faith in this revival. However, Season 1 of Total Drama Island 2023 ended up being a pleasant surprise for many, myself included. While not without its faults, the revival's first season was pretty good. The cast was mostly strong, the writing and humor were on point, the increased diversity was handled well, it was an all-around good time, which makes the way Season 2 turned out all the more painful. In contrast to the largely positive reception of the revival's first season, the response to this one was far more divisive. While it's definitely not as bad as All Stars or Pahkitew Island, I, like many others, found Season 2 of Total Drama 2023 to be a massive disappointment. Despite starting off pretty strong, by the second half, everything just kinda fell apart, and we were left with a painfully underwhelming, aggravating season. What exactly made Season 2 such a letdown? Well, once again, I'll be dividing my thoughts on this season into 3 main issues, starting with problem number 1. The romance. A recurring problem that often plagues even some of the best seasons of Total Drama is its tendency to put an unnecessary amount of focus on shipping and relationship drama to the point of taking attention away from the plot lines and characters that aren't involved in said relationship drama. Now this isn't a problem in every Total Drama installment, with Season 1 of the revival managing to avoid falling into this trap. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about Season 2, which is focused almost exclusively on the romance between Priya and, of all characters, Caleb. Now if these two at least had a decent romance, I could just say that it had an annoying amount of focus and be done with it. But no, Priya and Caleb have quite easily one of the worst written romances in the entire history of this franchise. Sure, they might not be toxic like Sky and Dave, or everyone involved in the infamous Courtney, Duncan, Gwen love triangle, but Priya and Caleb more than make up for it by being the single most lame, boring, generic, pointless pairing that this series has ever seen. Let's start off by explaining how these two became an item. You see, Caleb has a massive chip on his shoulder over being the first one voted off last season. So in order to ensure that he has a better chance of making it to the finals, he decides to develop an alliance with Priya due to her winning last season, flirting and feigning interest in her in order to sweeten the deal, which Priya buys hook, line, and sinker. However, Caleb ends up developing actual feelings for Priya, culminating in them becoming official. Unfortunately for Caleb though, he's a massive idiot and told Z earlier on that he was just using Priya, leading to a massive misunderstanding when the truth inevitably comes out, and Caleb having to fix things between them. This is literally just Priya and Millie's storyline from last season. I'm not joking. This romance arc hits literally the exact same beat that Priya and Millie's plotline did. A character uses Priya for personal gain, they end up growing to genuinely care about her, their lies are revealed and they have a falling out, before ultimately making up. The only difference is that it's done infinitely worse with Caleb and Priya. Priya and Millie had an engaging relationship that was well paced and fully developed. In contrast, Priya and Caleb's relationship is a generic hetero romance completely devoid of any and all substance. There is absolutely nothing remotely interesting about their relationship in the slightest. And that's partially because unlike Millie, who was a fully realized character who contrasted and complemented Priya's character nicely, Caleb, despite getting far greater screen time this time around, still has no semblance of a personality. Let's just compare Millie and Caleb for a second. Millie is a self-conscious introvert with poor social skills, who sucks at the game, and is far more interested in finishing her book than actually winning. Meanwhile, Caleb is nice, he has muscles, and he likes Priya. That's it. That's everything there is to Caleb as a character. Now let's see how their relationships with Priya progress. Millie, at the start, isn't interested in even trying to win, and relies on Priya to carry her throughout the game. In contrast, Priya is a kind, savvy athlete who knows exactly how total drama works, and is determined to both win and make Millie a better competitor. The friendship between the two is one that gradually blossoms over time. You can see how Priya's unwavering support slowly changes Millie, making her not just want to be a better competitor, but be a better person and friend. It's a sweet friendship that's paced and written in a way where them becoming besties feels fully justified. Meanwhile, after Caleb spends the first several episodes only using Priya, they have one semi-meaningful conversation in episode 6, and he's immediately in love with her. That's it. No build-up or anything. They're just in love now. Up until that moment, I didn't get any sense that this relationship was remotely sincere on Caleb's end. The progression of this relationship into something genuine was so poorly communicated that, unlike with Millie, who I could tell was gradually caring more and more for Priya each episode, I thought that every single ship tease moment with Caleb and Priya was meant to be insincere, and that the show was telling me that Caleb is a manipulative jerk who's just using Priya and I should hate him for it. Was Caleb starting to develop genuine feelings for Priya beforehand? If so, when? Was I supposed to be invested in this relationship sooner? It feels like Caleb immediately goes from shallow and manipulative to genuine and love-struck in seconds.
Nah, I mean, Priya's nice, but this is about the game. Strategy. I hope Priya isn't going home. She's actually kind of amazing. Smart, funny, pretty. Maybe there could be more than an alliance between us.
This development right here was the moment where Season 2 started to lose me. Not only because I knew exactly how this storyline would predictably play out, but because again, we've been here before. Priya's already done this song and dance with Millie, only a lot better. What makes this development all the weirder is that early on, it genuinely felt like they intended for Caleb to be the villain, but the writers for some reason changed their minds and decided to have him do a complete 180 in episode 6. Seriously, before this moment, I was so certain that this arc would be about Caleb trying, but ultimately failing to manipulate Priya, because Damien figures out that Caleb's only using her, and after some drama, Priya sees that Caleb's full of shit and realizes that Damien's the guy for her, bruising Caleb's ego and leading him to go full villain. Since they were clearly setting Priya and Damien up in Season 1, did the writers just forget that? Why did they think we'd rather see Priya end up with this boring piece of wood than Damien, Total Drama's greatest character in all of his Giga Chad glory? Okay, so Priya and Caleb becoming a couple feels rushed and unearned when compared to Priya and Millie's friendship. Do they at least have a decent dynamic? No. Everything about their relationship is painfully bland. There's quite literally nothing of substance or intrigue to their dynamic. They don't complement or contrast each other in any way that is interesting or meaningful. They're just super lovey-dovey with each other and not much else. Now, the last few episodes do introduce the idea of Caleb being really naive and honorable to a fault, leading Priya to gradually become more fed up with Caleb's utterly awful social game and how he refuses to prioritize her, his girlfriend, over his insistence of honoring the alliance Julia, who sucks, forced him into. You'd think that this would lead to literally anything, like a mildly interesting conflict, or at least some meaningful character growth on Caleb's end, but no. Priya's completely over it by the finale, and Caleb remains a wishy-washy idiot with no personality. Also, this is completely at odds with his characterization earlier this season, where he was portrayed as a competent manipulator willing to play with Priya's heart. His characterization as this super honorable, naive dude in the later episodes isn't treated like a new development either. They just act like Caleb was always like this, because who needs character consistency, am I right? God, they really did not know what to do with Caleb this season. Why couldn't you be Damien? Honestly, I'm struggling to find a reason as to why these two love each other so much. There's so little meaningful development in this relationship that I'm not entirely sure what Priya sees in Caleb beyond his looks. Their one meaningful conversation does allude to Caleb having a similar upbringing and being intelligent like Priya, but this aspect of Caleb is literally never brought up again, nor does it play into his characterization in the following episodes. It generally feels like this tidbit was added to Caleb's character, not as a means to give him any depth, but just so he could have something in common with Priya in order to justify this romance. Because Caleb isn't a character, he's just an object for Priya to fawn over. Again, I don't understand why they felt the need to make this nothing character Priya's love interest when Damien, a character with an actual personality who already had ship tease with her, was right there. What was the point in any of this? Total drama. I just don't understand you sometimes. If all that wasn't bad enough, this lame-ass romance also ended up hurting Priya's character, which sucks because she was one of my favorites in the revival. While I think that Priya's still a perfectly likable character, she's far less engaging this season. Her whole thing of being a genre-savvy athlete is heavily downplayed, with Priya now being far less competent and mostly defined by her boring relationship with her boring boyfriend. Seriously, girl, you can do so much better. Everything about Priya x Caleb is absolutely baffling to me. It is a bland, poorly paced, unearned, obnoxious romance, and I don't understand why it exists. I was genuinely more emotionally invested in Ripper x Axel, and that was a joke pairing. I'm telling you, they were better off just making Caleb the villain. Yeah, it'd be a repeat of Alejandro, but I'd gladly take him becoming We Have Alejandro at Home if it meant avoiding this terrible romance. Also, I'm almost certain that a villainous Caleb would make for a much more engaging antagonist than problem number 2. We have Heather at home. If you watched my video on season 1 of the Total Drama Revival, you'll know that I wasn't exactly a fan of Julia. While she was perfectly tolerable, I found Julia to be a pretty bland retread of the alpha bitch trope that they already executed masterfully with Heather all the way back in the original Total Drama Island. However, Julia somehow ended up being handled far worse here than she was last season. As uninteresting of a character Julia was in season 1, there were at the very least some ideas with her that were conceptually interesting, like her main strategy being to crush every challenge and win immunity. Plus, the season at least gave equal focus to its other villain, Bowie, who was an actually entertaining, interesting villain. This season though, Julia takes center stage as the main villain, and the way she's characterized here feels really off. While she's still the same shallow mean girl as before, the way she operates is a lot different. While Julia in season 1 had an awful social game, which she recognized, and put all her energy into winning challenges, season 2 inexplicably decides that she's actually this master manipulator who's able to effortlessly play everyone. Suddenly, she's able to anticipate each camper's every move and effortlessly out-gambit them. This isn't even treated like a new development. The season just acts like Julia was always this way, even though most of her attempts at manipulation last season failed miserably. What makes it worse is that none of her victories feel remotely earned. Like, everyone on the show knows from last season that Julia is a horrible person who can't be trusted, yet for some reason, they all decide to believe everything she says without question. The entire cast just blindly takes every word this awful, untrustworthy person says at face value, because apparently everyone's an idiot except for Julia. There's literally a point where Priya, who's supposed to be an expert in all things total drama, blindly falls for one of Julia's manipulations, and later admits that it was really stupid to not suspect that she was playing her. Like, they knew! The writers knew that Julia shouldn't have been able to manipulate Priya, but they still had her pull it off because they want to make Julia look smarter than she actually is, even if it means derailing Priya's character even further. Seriously girl, what did they do to you this season? As much as I didn't care for her in season 1, I can at least say that Julia earned her placement in the show. I can at least say that she had to put in genuine effort into making it as far as she did. Here though, it feels like most of her success stemmed from either everyone being an idiot, or things just kind of working out for her. What's even more frustrating is that a lot of the stuff Julia pulls off happens off screen. Probably the most egregious example of this is how she managed to steal the immunity idol from my boy Damien off screen. It is never explained when she got the idol or how she figured out where Damien hid it. She just has it now because it's Julia, and everything just goes right for her this season. I know I said that she felt like a knockoff Heather in the first season, but there, Julia at least had some traits that distinguished her from her predecessor. This season though, Julia is literally just we have Heather at home. Everything from their personalities to the way they operate are exactly the same. The only difference is that Julia is an infinitely worse written character in every way, completely lacking the cunning, charisma, and ruthlessness that made Heather such a great love-to-hate villain. Like, the revival loves to hype up how awful of a person Julia is, but honestly, she's pretty toothless when compared to Heather. What made Heather so great was that she wasn't just your typical mean girl. Heather was a fucking monster. She didn't just want to beat you, she wanted to destroy you. This is the girl who read Gwen's diary out loud on national television, made out with her boyfriend right in front of her, and remorselessly backstabbed the closest thing she had to a friend. What horrible things does Julia do? She gives Priya a wedgie. Wow, that is so bad. You really are a grade A villain, Julia. Nasty stuff right there. Nasty stuff. On top of that, not only did Heather always feel like a capable, ruthless manipulator from day one, but things didn't always go perfectly for her. Yeah, Heather was good at the game, but she wasn't infallible. And unlike Julia, when Heather comes back in the following seasons, no one trusts her. After everything she's pulled, everyone is understandably weary of Heather and aware that she's horrible. As a result, things go far less smoothly for her, forcing Heather to become more of a team player, which would lead her to gradually evolve into more of a jerk with a heart of gold anti-hero, who's still more than capable of being an absolute savage. Heather wasn't just an alpha bitch. She was one of the most competent, interesting characters in all of Total Drama, while Julia here is a pale imitation, completely devoid of charm and intrigue, who makes it this far in season 2, not because of her own merits, but due to writing contrivances and everyone being a moron. Seriously, if these two were to ever go head to head with each other, it would end with Heather completely destroying Julia on an emotional and psychological level. The one thing, the only thing that Julia has going for her at all is her relationship with MK, a character who I actually like quite a bit. Julia and MK's whole dynamic is that they love how horrible and deceitful the other is, and revel in just being the absolute worst together. The two of them honestly have a genuinely fun friendship. Yes. MK and Julia are friends.
You are vicious!
Stop it! You're making me blush.
Very good friends.
Why? Because you like me?
What? No, no, that is...
Just gals being pals.
If MK's brain drove a cool car, I'd date it.
I mean, what completely heterosexual, not at all sapphic girl hasn't said that about their female friend, who they have a completely platonic relationship? These two are gay as hell. This is a little bit off topic, but does this season really expect me to believe that MK and Julia aren't in lesbians with each other? Just look at them! Funny enough, while I wasn't able to find the original tweet, I remember Terry McGurran making this vague post in early to mid-January about how not all relationships are romantic, and that friends have different ways of expressing their care for each other. People immediately guessed that this was his way of saying that MK Julia isn't canon, and sure enough, they end the season not becoming an item. So, they had to have known, right? There's no way that they wrote these two to be this gay by accident. You already gave us wholesome Yaoi last season. Now give us evil Yuri, damn it! So yeah, Julia is actually tolerable when she has MK to bounce off of. So imagine how happy I was when MK got voted off, leaving Julia as the sole villain, and now without the one character that made her bearable. If Caleb falling for Priya was when this season started to lose me, MK getting voted off was the point where I knew that this season was a lost cause. There's no reason why MK shouldn't have been this season's villain. Not only is she a vastly more entertaining, unique antagonist, being this antisocial smartass who prefers to scheme behind the scenes, but she basically was the main villain for the first 5 episodes, with Julia acting more as her helper. It genuinely feels like the original plan was for MK to be the main villain alongside Caleb, but like with Caleb, Season 2 completely abandoned any notion of her being the big bad come episode 6, and opted to just have Dollar General Heather be the villain again. Seriously, it is unreal how much worse Season 2 got after the first 5 episodes. Interestingly enough, there was a point where it seemed like the season was going to give Julia some much needed depth by having her grow conflicted over having to compete against MK post-merger, but this conflict was dropped almost immediately after its introduction, and Julia instantly goes back to being a one-dimensional alpha bitch. Boy, that was a close one. For a second there, it looked like Julia was going to become an actual character and not just Where's Heather, and we can't have that because giving Julia an arc might distract from the romance. I'm sorry, but Julia absolutely did not work as this season's villain. What little Julia had going on for her in Season 1 and early Season 2 was completely stripped away, leaving us with this pale imitation of total drama's greatest villain. With all that said, despite how much I dislike Julia, I still like her more than Caleb. They're both extremely boring characters, but unlike Caleb, Julia at least has some semblance of a personality. Julia at least has a kind of compelling relationship with her girlfriend. So if it's worth anything to all of you Julia stans out there, she's no longer my least favorite character in the revival, which is just a sheer testament to how much of a nothing character Caleb is. My god, these two are really some of the most bland, painfully forgettable characters in this franchise's history. Guess who make it to the finals? Problem number 3. The finale. So for reasons that I cannot begin to fathom, the writers saw this cast of genuinely likable characters and thought that the audience wanted to see the 2 least interesting ones make it to the end. Oh, and Wayne's there too. Yeah, Wayne also makes it to the finale. Does it seem weird that I'm just now mentioning the last of this season's finalists this far into the video? Well, imagine how it must have felt seeing him ultimately win this season. Listen, I like Wayne, and I'm glad that he won instead of either of the charisma vampires he was up against, but his winning doesn't feel nearly as earned as it could have been. Unlike past finalists, Wayne doesn't have much of a presence in the plot or that much of a storyline. There was the whole thing about him and Raj not wanting to cheat in challenges, but Raj was the more prominent of the two in that storyline, due to him being the main reason why Bully was conflicted over going along with MK and Julia's plans. Unlike Raj, Wayne is almost strictly a comic relief character who doesn't get a whole lot to do here, especially from episode 6 onwards, when Priya and Caleb's bullshit romance completely takes over the plot. Wayne being this underdog who miraculously wins it all is a good idea, it's just that the season didn't set it up very well. Like, maybe if Raj was voted off sooner, and they introduced this idea that he's completely hopeless without him, forcing Wayne to gradually become more of an individual, then him winning this season would have felt more justified. Admittedly, I'm not nearly as pressed about this issue as I am with all the nonsense with Priya, Caleb, and Julia, and in Seasonal Rot Showcase, this is usually the point where I'm the most frustrated, but talking about the season finale first would mess with the flow of this video. Also, despite my issues with how they handled Wayne winning, I actually did enjoy the finale a fair bit. Wayne's antics were amusing, Julia and MK got to interact again, and I liked how they incorporated the other contestants here. My favorite part was when the show said in no uncertain terms that no one aside from Priya remotely gives a crap about Caleb. As it should be. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to make up for the all-around mediocre quality of this season. The aftermath. Okay, so I can't exactly say what impact Season 2 of The Revival had on Total Drama as a whole, considering that its finale aired only about a month after this video's upload. Let's be real though, this is far from the first time a season of Total Drama ended up being disappointing. Any fan can tell you that Total Drama isn't exactly known for its consistency, yet we always keep on coming back for more. As of this recording though, there's no word as to whether or not The Revival is getting renewed. Now you'd think that a revival of easily Fresh TV's most popular show would be a shoo-in for a renewal, but considering how very few shows today are able to get more than 2 seasons, as well as the absolutely disastrous way its release is being handled, I can't help but feel pessimistic about this show's future. Hopefully my pessimism is unfounded, but if this is it for Total Drama, then man, what a lame note to end things on. Final thoughts. If Season 1 of the Total Drama Revival was a pleasant surprise, then Season 2 is everything I expected and feared it would be. If I could describe Season 2 of the Total Drama Revival in one word, it'd be bland. Everything from the writing, to the main romance, to the villain is just aggressively bland. Which is really frustrating, because unlike the previous cartoon seasons I've talked about in this video series, I honestly think that this season started out pretty good. The first 5 episodes really were entertaining, and it seemed like this season was shaping out to be just as good as the first, only for Season 2 to take a turn for the worse in Episode 6, and things only going downhill from there. It truly feels like the writers originally wanted to do something more interesting with this season, but partway through, decided for whatever reason to shift gears and make it into something that was safe, boring, and derivative to the point of being obnoxious. In terms of how it stacks up against other installments of the Total Drama Cinematic Universe, I put it right about here. Worse than the likes of Action and Revenge of the Island, but still not terrible like All Stars or Pahkitew Island. Regardless, this season was just a massive letdown, and I'm almost certain that Evil Yuri is going to be the only thing from this season that anyone will remember. And that was another installment of Seasonal Rock Showcase. What were your thoughts on this latest season of Total Drama? Did it leave you burned like it did me? How disappointed are you that Evil Yuri wasn't made canon? Feel free to discuss in the comments below if you like. Maybe even consider subscribing if you want to hear more of me rambling on about cartoons. And what the hell? As an extra incentive, if I somehow reach 1,000 subscribers, I'll cover Season 4 of Star vs. the Force of Evil on here, because I am not above torturing myself in exchange for online attention. Until then, I'd like you all to join me in praying for the downfall of Priya and Kalo's relationship. Long live Priya x Damien.